Dimp Digital presents Idle Game Chat.
Cool.
So Logan, if you remember, I know it's testing that brain of yours, which doesn't remember a lot of things, but a few weeks ago we were slagging off Red Dead Redemption, the port, the PS4 version. We didn't get a PS5 version. It's going to Switch, all this nonsense. It was like, what are you lazy bastards doing?
Yeah, rightly so.
No
Stand by
60
that.
FPS, nothing. Just a straight port of it. Well, stealthily, Rockstar released a new update for the PS4 version of Red Dead Redemption, and on the PS5, it adds an option to enable 60 FPS. No fanfare, no announcement, just dropped in there a month or so after the release. And it's there for people that have got the PS5 version. You can choose 60 FPS or 30 FPS. I think
Still
a lot
not
of...
good enough.
Well, what do you want now?
I wanted more.
Well,
I think that's the biggest problem with it. Is that
native
it's like,
PS5 and Xbox Series X version. That's what you wanted.
well, I don't know if I wanted. I don't know what I want. I'll tell you what I can get. I mean, in an ideal world, I'd love that, like a fully blown remaster would be joyous. But in reality, when they've got GTA 6 going on, like that's all hands on deck for that, isn't it? So I can understand it, but I bloody loved Red Dead Redemption. Like, I think if I went back to play that again, I'd be like, this is amazing. Like, so I don't know. I mean, good. They've added it in.
The
It
minimum
kinda ticks
requirement's
off.
been hit at least. You get the
Yeah,
frame
I
rates.
mean,
and
yeah.
like,
It's exactly that.
I
yeah.
think if it launched of this, it'd have been less of a hassle. I think a lot of people are like, well, how is that
Yeah,
still running at
that's fair.
30? And it just
Yeah.
seemed even lazier than what it perhaps was, but just bizarre that they didn't think of just... I mean, maybe it took them this long to add it. Maybe there was a little bit of extra time.
Well, then
that was
why?
required. Well,
This is
that's what I'm...
then
Well,
why? Like, why do they do this? Why do they chuck it out? Like, you know, it's going to get crapped on. We've said umpteen times on this podcast, 60 FPS is the minimum requirement of the bare minimum these days. I'm adamant about it.
oh, especially
I don't
for
care.
games from 2 generations ago.
Right? Like, it's got to be. So to release it without that and go, there you go, like, well, everyone's just going to be like, why would I? Well, yeah. So it's nice to see that they've stealth dropped it in there, but as you say, sort of, it would have been better for them, you would have thought, if they'd have delayed it and put it in and said, look, you got a nice little 60 FPS version for you to go and play now, and everyone would go, oh, thank you. Would have preferred a little bit more graphical enhancement and a little bit more polish, but I'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's there now, so to be honest, that does mean that I may consider one day going back to it, because to be honest, when it was stuck in the 30 mode, I was like, well, there's no point going back to that. It's going to feel like slop. I'm going to get annoyed. What I really want now is for Red Dead Redemption 2 to get the same treatment, some sort of PS5/Series X uplift, because they've done that PC version now, which would have unlocked a lot of the... You know, they can go much higher on PC, obviously, but they've done the 60 FPS. They can perhaps use what they've learnt there to drop that into the console versions. That's what I want. And then you've got the 1-2 punch, Red Dead Redemption 2, absolutely cackling all the way to the bank. And
I'm not that keen on going, but I would like to play Red Dead 2, but I get scared off by the size. Like, it's massive, and I did 80 to 90 odd hours when I got it when it was released. And I really feel like I scratched the surface of that. Yeah. But I don't really feel like I got too I wanted to do the ending so much that I mainlined it essentially. Yeah. And I think with this new brain, I'd like to go back and see how
what do you mean this new brain? What's this transplant?
Well, no, I'm a bit more methodical in how I complete games these days. I think when I used to get single players, I used to just sort of pretty much mainline,
burn through them and get them out of the way.
Yeah, a little bit. You know, not completely, but I definitely I'm a bit more thorough in my approach these days. Not to the nth degree like Ronnie is, but a happy medium where I'm sort of feel like I'm getting a bit more involved with stuff. Hence why I spent so bloody long on Assassin's Creed and various other games, like just getting involved with stuff. But I don't think Red Dead was like that big. So
The original.
I like the idea of going back and doing it and seeing what it's all about. But I think those graphics would scare me off a bit. I think that would bother me.
I think it'll look all right, you know. I think it wouldn't look too terrible. I think it'll actually age pretty well, but we'll see. It's a Red Dead Redemption Game of the Year edition. This is on howlongtobeat.com, which is the place to go. Main story 23 hours, main plus sides 31 hours, completionist, so if you're going real hardcore with all the challenges, 50 hours. That seems light work these days. Some of the took we've had with Valhalla and whatnot, breaching 100 hours. Like that seems like I could do that in a weekend if I wanted, based on what they've been doing these days. And I
absolutely wouldn't go completionist, but you think 30 hours for a good little go there. You think that's reasonable, right? As you say, when I think I spent 80 to 90 hours in Red Dead 2 and basically mainlined it, whilst doing a few little bits like pulling people under train tracks, getting sidetracked. But
there was an achievement on the original for getting. Yeah. I think it was this specific. You had to get a woman, tie her up, and put her on the train tracks, and it was called something dastardly or something like that. I don't know if you get away with that these days. To call it out, there's no chance.
Yeah, no way. What's his name would be absolutely up in arms. But yeah, it's one of those things that I will probably hold out for a full blown remaster that will probably never come. But I feel like they would do it. I don't know why.
They should do a 1-2 package. They should do a PS5
Have
version.
They remastered anything else before?
Well, they did that fucking GTA trilogy, didn't they? And absolutely blew it because they ported it out to, Grove Street Games, and it was just an absolute hellhole shitter when it comes. I think it's okay now, but initially it was just dog shit. So I think that. Well, here's the thing: I was reading that they were put off by the reception of that, and I was like, "Well, it was shit, wasn't it?" Like it was like if it was a good remaster of those games that wasn't complete dog crap, then it would have been clapped in undoubtedly. So don't be scared off; just do it correctly. Is it?
I'd love. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say Red Dead Redemption, 18 hours for main story, 26 for because I was doing the Game of the Year edition, which included that Undead Nightmare expansion. So it's actually probably a little bit shorter. Anyway,
so I think it's got potential. I mean, I really wish that Rockstar would go back. I don't know whether they feel like they're classics and they don't need to or don't want to actually remaster them. But I feel like, can you imagine like some of those OG Grand Theft Autos from the PS1 like remastered and put on like an arcade store or something? I don't know. I just think surely it's worth putting a bit of time in to do that. Like, how many people would go back and play some of their back catalogue? Even Bully.
Well, that's the one, really. I mean, people want the sequel to Bully. That's the annoyance that they've got strung up on this GTA and Red Dead sort of train, and both those games take nearly 10 years these days, sort of 5 to 7.
Phenomenal.
So the likes of Bully coming down the pipe are probably slim to none, but we'll see. I mean, there's definitely potential in their back catalogue to bring some of that stuff forward. I know the original GTA was on that PlayStation Classic thing.
Yeah,
and they don't play very well, if I'm honest. Like they just the top down, you can't see where you're driving. It's all a bit of a one shot on you down. Like you don't really get a lot of fight back. But I remember playing those games back then. I was like, this is amazing because you could just do what you wanted, and that was like my dream at the time. And then when GTA 3 come along, I was like, wow, that's it now, life complete because it's in 3D. But nowadays we're asking for 4K and 60 FPS, otherwise we won't even sniff it.
I ain't asking for 4K. Well, I don't want it. 8K. I don't want the resolution. Well,
the next one.
12 frames.
If you're fucking lucky. Anyway, Red Dead Redemption slowly working its way up. That gives it, in my opinion, something for me to perhaps look at. And seeing that time scale to beat isn't too terrible. That's actually not too bad. But I'm not going to commit to it until we get a nicer version of Red Dead 2 because I'd like to do that sort of a 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
And do it that way. But that's Red Dead. They're slowly working their way through that, and 60 FPS if you're on PS5. If you're on the Xbox, as we stated back in the day, you haven't got a version of this. You've got the backwards compatibility version. I don't think they've gone back and added that to. If you're playing on Series X, it's all a bit complicated when they've not bothered to release a native Xbox One version, but maybe they'll get to that later on. Anyway, break out and formally introduce the podcast. This is Idle Game Chat, Dimp Digital's flagship show and only show. I'm the host, Apps. Got Logan here, the FGL Grand Prix winner, resident referee. We're going to give you some idle chat about video games, hopefully, for the next hour and change. It could go longer, actually. In fact, our impressions have been going longer and longer. I think I've just given up trying to rein those in and allowing all manner of to be discussed. So
self-indulgent now, isn't it?
It's easier to do that than force it to be shut down. It feels like it's more effort. So I always let it go. This is a grassroots and independent endeavour here at Dimp Digital, but you can join our community by going to patreon.com/Dimp Digital. You'll get early access to this show. Usually goes up on a Saturday. Everyone else gets it on a Monday. So you're ready for the weekend. You wake up Saturday morning, you're like, cool, what a way to start with my fucking instant coffee, because we've somehow run out of proper fucking coffee in this house this morning.
That honestly would break me. The thought of having to have an instant coffee.
Are you in control of the coffee in your house, or do you let it go to the missus?
Well, I have to monitor it, because if I left it, then there is a chance it could get blown. So, like the other week, I was off work. Normally get one bag of filter coffee or whatever you want to call it, coffee beans, ground coffee beans for my coffees, because I was off work and having more coffee at home. Or ideally needed 2 bags. So it got to like a Thursday and I was running low. So when I was out Friday, I had to get some more ahead of shopping. But so you do have to be careful with it. But I've got to the point before where they ain't been bought at shopping and I've got caught out, and it really does upset me.
My view, this is what I've said, because I don't get involved in it, and perhaps I should, but that's just the way it operates in the house. I'm not really out doing much of the groceries, is what people. This would fall into that category. I said, buy 2 packets, okay?
Yeah.
When one runs out, put it on the list for the next week, buy another packet. And that way you can never run out. I happened with butter once as well, and I got annoyed about that.
Yeah.
But they don't want to listen. So my ideas aren't being taken on board. And then now I've got this... I like to put 2 scoops of that instant toot in here to try and get the tar taste. And
yeah, it just ends up going a bit grainy.
Yeah.
Like it just gets. It's a really tricky thing to do. So yeah, it does upset me. But I'm with you on it. It's kind of like I'd rather have extra. But then some weeks we don't use any butter, and then she buys 3 butters, and I go, well, we've got 5 butters in the fridge. What are we doing?
Yeah.
And no coffee.
Well, none of it's going to go off quickly. That's my argument. Just get it stacked up and then you're done with. But anyway, that's the introduction to the podcast. Patreon.com/Dimp Digital. You could join our small community. A couple of patrons there. We love them. Hello. I don't think they listen to it on the early feed. Not on time anyway, because the other week I posted the same episode 2 weeks in a row on the Patreon feed. And I didn't get told until a week later. Like, oh, by the way, and I was like, does that show you're not listening to it day in date? Probably, but
a little test.
Yeah, it wasn't a test. I was just fucking careless. That's the trouble with leaving me to do it. But that's the place you can go to do that, and we would appreciate it, but not necessary. Unlike these other jokers out there who are claiming foul. Anyway, you've got a few games that have released for the FGL. Run through some scores and quick reviews. Forza Motorsport. Xbox pumping out the first parties 2 in a month. Well, 2 in 2 months, really. So I think this is the 8th, maybe the 9th entry into this series, but they've got rid of the number, which suggests to me that this is going to be it now. This Forza Motorsport, for at least this generation, is going to be built upon, iterated, content added, that sort of cycle, paid or otherwise. I don't know what plans they've got for it. In terms of a fantasy gaming league, it's in Parky's team and it's also in Adkins' Grand Prix team. So they're the guys that are going to profit from this. Sitting on an 84 which is... I did some data, so I've run a forecast, which I'll share with the audience after this. Now the transfer window's closed, no one can take any of my comments as advice. It's like when you use people that talk online, they're like, this is not financial advice, I'm just telling you what I did. But you can do that. People start squabbling, saying, "Oh, you're helping them." I'm not helping anyone. I'm wrong most of the time, so I don't use what I'm saying. But now I can freely say stuff without being called some sort of cheat. Anyway, Forza Motorsport's got an 84. What I did was I went for the last few entries on OpenCritic and did an average, and it came out at 85. So that's the forecast I'd plugged in before the game come out. So it was only 1 point below that. Not the high 80s that people, or the 90s even, that Forza Horizon's got, but I would argue that Forza Horizon is much more of a... You think about the people that get given this game to play, they're gaming, quote-unquote, journalists, media, opinion, mate, the ultimate nerds. I've always said that Forza Horizon is like nerds' first car game, because it gamifies racing. It's arcade, it's light touch, it's open world, it's got all this collectible, like it's got all the trappings of what a game would have, just with you do it on four wheels. Whereas Forza Motorsport is clearly aimed at a more of a motorsport sim-ish crowd. Not quite sim, because iRacer on PC, that's the
sim arcade, isn't it?
Simcade, yeah. But it's more serious, essentially, is what I'm trying to get to. Which means that when these same chumps get given this to play, they're like, yeah, it's not Horizon. So therefore, I don't feel it's as good. Fair or not? Opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it is. It's really difficult to judge games in isolation or within their category. You just judge what's in front of you, right? And I think when you know that there's this Horizon version, which is, I would argue, a funner way to do it. Like, that's a really poor way of putting it, but it's the only way I can articulate it. I think it is better. Like, I prefer Horizon to just motorsport racing in general. So I can understand why it's... I mean, it's still a good score, right? I think like basically an 8.5 out of 10. Like, it's pretty good. Like, it's not anything to be ashamed of. But I think we've said before that some of these more specific games struggle to resonate with kind of the mass community, if that makes sense. And it can go one of two ways, right? If you stick someone and review this that only knows sim racing games, then you might still get the same answer. Like, in the grand scheme of things, like, is it really going to be a 90, 95 for them in terms of like? So, I think it's fair. I think it's fine. As I say, it's no. If it come out at a 60, you'd be going right. What's like, what are we doing here? But
it's in that. It's
no
in
disgrace.
that fucking bracket, isn't it? The good thing about OpenCritic is they like tag games based on the score with like a little colour and a little icon. So I think Mighty is the top one. Like, that's like, you got Mighty, Strong, Fair and Weak. So you've got Mighty. The way they do it is not on score necessarily, not on like, 84 and above means Mighty. It's actually based on the top 10% of all the games that they've got in their database. So in terms of the ratings, it depends on how highly games are scoring. So this actually falls into the top 10% of games that are released. So it's still in that bracket. 84 seems to be the cutoff point. 83 goes down to the next 30%. And then when you get to like 30 to 60%, like on the lower end, and then you've got one that's the bottom 30%, the real dregs of society lurking in there. So I think that tagging is useful just to show that it's despite the number being, not 90, like, you can look at that tag and go, yeah, it's still in the top 10%, which is where you want to be. You don't want to be lower than that, certainly, but if you can get in that that higher echelon, you're laughing. Does this game have any interest to you, considering...
No.
Well,
no.
But you like cars. Brum brum.
Yeah, we've covered this.
Dodge Viper.
I just find them a bit dull.
Yeah.
Like,
it's the same opinion, I assume, for Gran Turismo as well. You wouldn't be interested in that.
No, but I used to love these games. I just find them a bit... I don't know. I used to like the arcade racing games. They were fun. I like driving, but I don't like the pressure, if you like, that comes from having to do simulation driving and trying to figure out how to stop my car spinning, and it's just not fun for me. So I just don't dabble in it, despite the fact that I like the cars. That's why I liked playing Horizon, is because it's a much more accessible way of doing it, and it's got rally and different sort of racing and everything kind of built into it. It's kind of a one-stop shop for me. So I'm sure it's great, a really good sim racer. I've got no doubt about that. But not my sort of bag these days.
It's on Game Pass. Just download it and have a few laps.
No, I mean, apart from the fact it'll probably be about 120 gig.
Yeah.
I know that. I mean, I used to love like Toca racing, and I did really enjoy racing games, but the world's moved on. Like, there's so many more fun things to play than racing games. I think racing games used to be an easy. I wouldn't say easy, but like, obviously from a development perspective, 25 years ago compared to what you've got now, like sim racing and racing games were easier or a more accessible way to code games. And I just feel like there's so much more to play now. Why would I sit there doing that?
Yeah.
That's probably a bit unfair, and some of the hardcore community would probably be going, "You're talking shit," and that's fair enough.
They ain't playing Footy Manager, are they? So it's like, they ain't playing that. Again, it's for a set audience. Whereas
exactly.
I'd argue Horizon broadens, and what's that fucking pun word? It broadens the horizons because it links in a much more accessible loop of gameplay and things to do that you see in other games, other open world games, and it just kind of ticks that box. So it's always up against it. Once Horizon come out, you could almost see like people just like, this is what I've been waiting for. I don't want a serious racer. I don't want to just race around circuits. I just want to have fun, and that's what that gives you. And Forza Motorsport needs to still be there though, because you do have that audience that wants to play, a bit more of a serious racer. And
it does look great.
Like,
yeah. Like it not just because I don't want to play it. Like, I can appreciate it. Like, it looks great, and they do a great job with it. I've got no doubt about that. It just doesn't appeal to me anymore, and it hasn't appealed to me for many, many years. I can't remember the last time I actually actively bought a proper racing game.
No, I mean, I've done the F1 games. But that's been it. But like Forza, I think I've Forza Motorsport 2. Dirt, yeah. Even
that's
that
I've played.
That started going off the boil for me when they made that into just racing. I know Ogsworth Salmon bloody loves that, but it's F1 or nothing for me. So this is never going to get on the menu, unfortunately. I just don't have a interest in cars, and yes, it is motorsport, but I'd rather do me proper racing if I can do it.
Come on, proper racing, craps on it.
Well, this ain't real, is it? It's like free lap races. They don't exist. You don't get fucking £250,000 cars and spin them around for 3 laps. No one's turning up for a track to watch that, so it's nonsense. I know there are endurance races and whatnot, but the core loop when I've played these is like you just get chucked into the crapper. What's interesting here though is we've got Nick Gillett from Metro Games Central, so he's been hung out to dry and named. Normally it's not. Normally it's Skynet who's just sort of doing it behind the scenes, but Nick's been named here. He gave it an 8 out of 10. A fabulously detailed racing game with a huge car roster and an engrossing single-player mode, slightly marred by forcefully encouraging you to perform practice laps before races. So maybe it is more of a motorsport game than I'm anticipating, but he's not happy. Well, he's not happy. He's gave it 8 out of 10, which is well within range. That's not a Nintendo game, so that's very high for Metro. That's what you've got to remember there. But
who's saying that an engaging campaign? I mean, that's one of the biggest problems is like with the racing games is incentive. The thing that I used to like
any
about
sports
Gran
game,
Turismo,
though, isn't it?
What's that?
It's kind
Esports.
of any sports game. Like, once you
yeah.
get past that, unless you're really into doing a career of sorts, then there's nothing there for you, really.
There's got to be progress. This is the thing that I used to like about Gran Turismo. Is you started out with a shitter, and the idea was to win the races, get the cash, do the cars up, win the races. It's kind of like building that kind of roster up and building your cash and getting to that Pikes Peak car. Like that was that was it. And arguably, look, people might say that's still there, and I think it is. To be fair, when I've dabbled with these before, you start off with a shit car and then work your way up. But
yeah, then you open some fucking box and it gives you a rank S car that just you never have to even change. You could just use that car and win the vast majority of events.
This is part of the problem. It's kind of like, I wouldn't say pay to win, but I've struggled with getting engaged with the loop.
Yeah.
And the thing that Football Manager keeps me going with is obviously the fact that you start off and you build your squad and your club and you sort of win stuff that's how it's kind of the loop. And I think that's what I've really struggled with in sort of sim races, is trying to get into the loop. And like from your perspective with F1, like obviously you're engaged in the season and the career mode and invested in that. Like that's what probably keeps you going. So I don't know how you replicate that in something like Forza.
No, it's just I don't think it can. I'm sure there probably is a way, but they have to think that I'm probably in the minority there, so why bother replicating something for that fucking moron? He ain't going to play it anyway, and they're right. So there's no point in spending time trying to consider that.
Into rights. Yeah.
Anyway, an 84 for Forza Motorsport. I think that caps off Xbox's final game of the year. Obviously, we'll do some sort of yearly post-mortem at the end of the year, but interesting to note they finally got that out, and it's there for people on Game Pass, or you can buy it for 70 UK pounds.
So I know you don't want to. We'll probably touch on this in a year in review later, but do you think that if that's the last game that Xbox have released, would you say okay year? Would you have expected more? I'm putting you right on the spot.
No, what have we had? We've had Hi-Fi Rush that came out the bins.
Yeah.
They did that Minecraft. Was it Legends? It's something else. I think it was Legends. There's another one. Well, maybe it was Legends because they're Dungeon. Anyway, they had a Minecraft spin-off.
Yeah.
Redfall, which was just a disaster. Starfield, which was not a disaster. Good to great, but didn't. I don't think. Well, it didn't get the 90 plus that I think people were expecting it to get. Not that really matters if I sit down and play it and enjoy it, but I think if we're just looking outside of the box of like outwards and in, you go, that's not quite hit the highs that I think many were expecting. And then Forza Motorsport's kind of where they've been there or thereabouts. I mean, it's better than last year, you'd argue, with the likes of Pentiment.
Better than about 5 or 6 years, isn't it? It's it's a reasonably
improved.
I mean,
it's an improvement. There's still much more room to improve. Yes.
Yeah.
They're on the journey. At least this feels like after Redfall would come out, like forget about that. You're like, right, let's do another reset with Starfield. Go Starfield, Forza, and then we'll see what they've got early next year. So, yeah, I think on the whole it's positive, but it's not the slam dunk blow away success year because they've not had one of those games. I think that's all it needed was one of those absolute stingers. But some will argue that is Starfield. It's just that it seems to be a bit divisive with certain audiences because of the way it's structured and whatnot. But I think generally,
I just don't think Xbox are going to do those big hitters anymore. I genuinely just don't think they're going to have, and if they do, they'll be few and far between. It'll be interesting to see how the ActiBliz acquisition might change that dynamic in the long term. But I don't know. You think they haven't? Is that what they do, or do they just
maybe
release?
It's not. It may just be that they make really good games for Game Pass 4 times a year, and that's kind of, and that's fine. That's actually pretty good. Most people would argue that's kind of what you need. So maybe it could well be that's how it ends up being, which is fine. And you may get the odd one that springs a trap and comes out and does brilliant. If I had to guess forward, it would be something like Hellblade 2 or Fable, which I would see doing that. And obviously the next Forza Horizon, but I do, I've gone on record as saying they don't really, it sounds snobbish, but that's not quite what we mean.
No, I agree, yeah. I agree.
For the simple fact is they delist them. So they don't care about them that much. So why would I have put that in that same bracket? It's like I said,
I agree.
Nerd's first car game.
I don't think it's a
that
bad
will irate
thing.
people, but that will really annoy people, but that's just the way it is.
Yeah. No, the thing is, it's good, but you can also, it's not like what's going to get you the adulation of the critics, right? It's not what
No.
people are aiming for when you're releasing a game to sort of get a pat on the back, right? But I've been thinking about this a little bit, and it's kind of like, we'd go, PlayStation releasing 90 pluses, and you go, well, yeah, they are, and Nintendo are doing the same.
They ain't releasing anything at the moment, PlayStation. Let's be honest. When we look at their year, go, what have you actually released? Nothing yet. Still a week and a half away from that.
Yeah, let's get Speddings out, and then everyone will forget about it.
It's got an 84. That'll be it. The worst year ever.
Xbox will still get crapped on.
Well, they're about to spend 70 billion. I think once you start spending that sort of money and you get Call of Duty, then all your excuses and your leeway's gone. You've evaporated that by just brute force and spending it. So you're going to get the smoke.
Yeah, I think that's fair as well. But yeah, I just thought I'd ask you what your perspective was, if that's them feet up now for the rest of the year. Initial reactions to it.
I think it is feet up now. I think that's more than enough, really. I mean, it's sort of 4 or 5 games, one absolute disgrace, which you kind of does sink the year slightly, but recovered somewhat in this back half of the year. But definitely better than what we've had, but certainly not the complete gold standard all year round. I think they've got. They could do better than this, and I think that's what especially after they close this acquisition, that's what they should be aiming for, and we should be asking for. But it's all going to get a bit muddy of waters. Well, we'll talk about Redfall later. Actually, an interesting stat.
We'll save it for then.
Assassin's Creed Mirage. Biff had this in his Grand Prix team. Going back to its roots, they're saying smaller game, 15 or so hours. So that's doable, isn't it? I think it's set in Baghdad, is what I remember from reading about. Anyway, it's sitting on a 77, which not a day oneer when that's. I mean, that seems cruel, but that's just how I look at it. It's I've played every entry into this other than Rogue, so I will get to this at some point, but not a week and change away from Speddings. Like, it's just not. It's not worth the stress of getting snarled up in that. And it's saying 15 hours, and then it taking me 30, and then I'm on the brink of Thursday night. I can't get over the line, and Spider-Man's out the next day, so it's not happening.
Yeah.
And a discount will have to be installed to go for this. So I do plan to get it one day. But one of the things that's interesting is this game's not like the last 3 in that. If we look at Valhalla, which we've both played, you're a warrior, you're a Viking warrior. So you just walk into most situations and just absolutely carve through everyone. And you can stealth it. You've got the option to do either or. If it goes wrong, you're more than equipped to deal with that situation. I mean, in fact, it's quicker just to run in and cut people's heads off. Yeah. This one, not so much. Your combat skills are diminished significantly, and it's more of a reliance on stealth, which I think people initially were applauding the idea of that, but when push comes to shove, and your only option really is to run away when you get found out, that's what I've seen in opinion circulating, that's an annoyance. Because you can stand and fight, but it's too basic for you to stand a chance against more than 3 guards. And the way in which they've designed it means that it's really hard to not get discovered in certain areas because it's quite smaller and condensed, and there's 3 guards in one corridor, for example. You're like, well, how do I get past this? So, well, you canny. You have to just run away and try and bait one of them out. I don't know. But anyway, 77's okay. What say you? Any interest in this Assassin's Creed entry, a lighter version of it? Basim, the guy who's lurking in Creed Valhalla, a story to be had, Baghdad, stealth, your favourite?
No. So the short answer is no. I mean, the only reason really that Valhalla brought me in was because of the Viking setting and story, which, as we said before, is my bag. And the fact that it was less focused on stealth. And, I actually thought the combat was pretty fun in Valhalla. I mean, the loop got a bit boring, but the combat was really good. I enjoyed it, and it gave you such a variety of ways of doing things. I enjoyed that. And it wasn't it wasn't focused on stealth. If you got caught, you could fight your way out, and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff was all pretty good. So I really enjoyed it. I'm surprised that after the success of Valhalla, commercially, at least for them, that they've not continued to try and bleed the cash cow. So you kind of applaud them a little bit for trying to bring it back to what it was, but you'd argue, 77 again, no disgrace. We've had such a phenomenal year, I think, in terms of high scoring games, that a 77 now looks poor. And it doesn't get on the list. But that's the standard you're operating to this year. And I can understand why people are frustrated after probably going in and playing Valhalla and then going back to a Mirage and going,
Well, I think it's a case of be careful what you wish for, because people were pining for a much more condensed version of Assassin's Creed, back to the old ones. And here's an interesting review snippet. Stephen Mills from Destructoid gave it a 7.5 out of 10, so close to that sort of median score that we've got of 77. For those looking for a pure return of form for the original Assassin's Creed, you're going to love Mirage. After all, the stealth, parkour and accompanying systems are the best they've been, and Baghdad is one of the best cities we've explored in the series yet. But for me, I can't help but wonder if the true Mirage was thinking this return to the old formula was the right direction to take. Which is an interesting statement, because I think that may well be people are like playing it going, this weren't as
good as I remember.
Well, the first one really wasn't that good in reality. The second one was really the one that I was like, they've got the formula right here. But I don't know about this one in Mirage. It's not something that's screaming at me, but I do want to get to it at one point. Just gonna have to make time
it sounds like it's doable. As you say, it's not as big. I think the biggest problem with Valhalla was its sheer amount of content. I don't feel like the criticism was that didn't no one like the combat or the way that it was just like, there's so much stuff to do here, it's ridiculous. Like, if you wanted to do a completionist of that, it's huge. So you'd argue if you just cut a slice out of that and made it a bit more streamlined, I think there'd be very little to criticize it for. So it's interesting that they've kind of decided they didn't want to do that. You think did they feel like they'd sold themselves out, doing that?
Potentially.
I don't know. It's interesting that they've decided to, because games usually evolve, right? And as they evolve, they usually become more or less successful. Very rarely do you see something evolve, becoming more successful, and then go, "No, we're going to rip up that rule book and go back to do something." It's a bit. I just find it a bit odd more than anything. Or maybe they just didn't have any ideas of how to continue the story on in that same way, so they tried to do something different. I forget
they're in this somewhat weird transition phase, because do you remember they were talking about Assassin's Creed Infinity or some sort of platform where you get that and then they add content to. And I wonder whether this was in the meantime we can put a smaller team on a smaller project. Do this whilst we're working on this next kind of big change, because they've kind of done those three, what I would say warrior games in Valhalla, what was the other one, Origins and Odyssey. They play very similarly. You can go out and just hack people to shreds, add all these new systems and whatnot. It's a bit more of a traditional open world game. And I felt like that concluded with Valhalla, and then there was talk about we're going to change what we do going forward. And I just wonder whether this project was sort of spun up as a stepping stone between that, to say, look, here's some things you don't forget about Creed. 'Cause it's been, when was the last update for Valhalla? Last year, end of last year, was it?
Yeah. They finalised the series, didn't they, in 2022, and they went, that's it.
12 months, and then they're like, here's Mirage, and then perhaps next year we can announce what we're going to do with this Infinity project. But there's talk they've got loads of shit in development, so who really knows? What's it? Let me read this sentence to you and see if you can make sense of this. Assassin's Creed Mirage is ranked in the 71st percentile of games scored on OpenCritic.
I never get percentiles.
No, what it means is if the best game is 100%, 100 percentile, this is 71. So it's close to the top than the bottom, but it's just a weird way of doing it. I was trying to think of a better way. So that's the top 29% of the games.
That's the way that I was thinking about it. It's like ranked at 71%.
Yes.
But it's just a bit, as you say, a bit of a weird way of doing it.
Top 29%. I'll go with that. It requires a bit of maths, though, doesn't it? So.
It does, yeah. But yeah, I think fine. Like, I think it's fine to do something different. But can you imagine if Call of Duty just all of a sudden went, next one, we're just going to do hand-to-hand combat, or we're just going to completely change. Like, you could be like, well, this, like, that. Why? Like, why would you do something different to what, like, radically different to what has brought you success with a large proportion of the audience? I don't know. I just find it a bit strange to sort of rip the rule book up and go back to basics. Like when it was at its peak. Like, it's just a bit of a strange thing to do for me. But what can you say?
Well, we'll see what they've got in store for us, because they've definitely got plans, and as to what they will be, I guess we'll find out in the coming months, if not sometime next year. Final one from the FGL, Detective Pikachu returns, which is a transfer that Hall made a little over a week ago. 67. So that's not good enough. And if you want the percentile, Detective Pikachu is ranked in the 34th percentile of games released on OpenCritic.
Wow.
So that's low down the rung.
Yeah.
That's not great. Here's a quick comment. IGN Italy, we're going to go to Francesco Destri. Detective Pikachu. It's cool. They translated it, obviously. Detective Pikachu: The Return is how they've translated it. So whoever's done the translations got that wrong. Only works as a large and very Pokemon container, but as a detective adventure, it will only be able to give some satisfaction to the youngest of players. That's the common thing I've seen, is that this is too easy, and like, unless you're a young child, there's nothing here in terms of challenge here. I've got zero interest in this, especially after seeing those. I mean, it's just not even. If it's got 99, I'll be like, hang on, I'll have a look at this, but that's not even close to where it needs to be for me to consider it. And I assume the same for you, because that Switch ain't going to get that dust out of it anytime soon. Well, actually, nope. Super Mario Wonder's out on the same day as Speddings too.
That's a problem.
Yeah. Well, not for me. I'm not going to play Wonder, but I know you were very interested in that, and now we've got the backlog of Spider-Man and Miles Morales done.
Yeah, I know, and I've put myself in an awkward position. What can you say? I mean, look,
Nintendo and Sony have done that by releasing the game on the same day.
Well, crapped on me, didn't they? Yeah, I mean, Spider-Man will go above it, but it definitely remains on the sniffometer. To be honest, I might put the Switch downstairs. Jodie said to me the other day, Harry was watching something like Super Mario Odyssey on like YouTube, and Jodie went, "Oh, that looks like a good game." So I've had it,
got it
for like years, and she was like, "Oh, really?"
Yeah.
So I was like, I might move that downstairs for her to play anyway. So yeah, I might say to her, "Don't play that Odyssey. Get this one, and then maybe we can do that co-op or something, and I'll do Speddings on my own. I'll figure it out." But it's a dilemma I didn't want.
No, it's not ideal, but people are going to have to make a choice, and a lot of people will end up getting both, I think, and not playing either of them. So that's how people operate. A couple of transfers. Parky trying to recover. So Hollow Knight Silk Song has been binned because no one trusts that it's going to come this year. I mean, it could just stealth drop randomly. I will say that could happen, but I think the safe option is to get rid of it. Transferred in Super Mario Wonder, so all eyes on that. And Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is not due till next year, has been subbed out for Super Mario RPG, which last time out, this is a remake, remaster and / remake, did get an 89 on GameRankings.com, so it could be on course to do something pretty good. What that leaves, here's the heads up forecast. So you've got one game left, which is Football Manager 2024. Parky's got Super Mario RPG, Spider-Man 2, Super Mario Bros. Wonder. So those 3 games will come out before Football Manager. So we'll know what Football Manager requires to get it over the line. I've forecasted Football Manager to get an 85 based on average of the last four or so entries. Super Mario RPG, I've given an 89 based on the score it got on its last sort of aggregate website. Spider-Man, I've given an 89 based on Spider-Man 1. And Wonder, I've given a 90 because it's a 2D new Mario game. If that all comes to fruition, you will have a, 21-point lead. So my view is you can add 5 or take 5 away from my scores and they'll still be roughly accurate. So if Football Manager gets an 80 and everything else and Parky's side scores 5 above, which would be 3 90 pluses, which unlikely but could happen, you could be in trouble.
Yeah.
So based on that forecast, scared or not?
But they've got, is that including sub penalties?
All the penalties have been... You've both had
fine.
2 subs, so 10 points have been shaved off for each team.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see. I mean, if that first one comes out and it's like a 90, you go, squeaky bum time here. Because I think there's a distinct possibility that Football Manager could score a bit lower. Yeah. Just purely on the fatigue factor, I think people are just going to be like, yeah, does what it does, 8 out of 10. Or do you know what I mean? I think that could easily happen. I mean, it's close to a banker as you get, but you never know. They've added a few bits and stuff this year. They've added the J-League and various other things that might give it a little bump, but you just don't know. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think, Nintendo ones are really hard to predict. Yeah. They're very rarely sort of mid-ground. They either tank or they do really well. That's at least my ignorant view. So it depends which one of these does what. But I think it's going to be close for the fans.
Hall seems to think they're going to win. I don't know where he's got that opinion from. His forecast had it 1 point gap. Parky winning it by 1 point. And then I looked at his numbers and he'd given you a 51 for one of your games. I thought, well, that's...
A 50? What, is that just
by accident, he typoed it. And he was like, that makes more sense. And which gave you like another 30 points. He was like, it'll still be close. And I was like, well, not by your own numbers, it won't. It would have to take something exceptional, I think, because Spider-Man's scoring... Basically, it's got to be 95s and above for Parky, and then that Football Manager's got a full foul into the 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, it could happen, but people that are doing the betting lines would suggest that you've got that in the bag. I think you're going to set a new record regardless, because I think Football Manager's got to get like an 80 or 74 or something for you not to set a new championship record, which means if Parky does win, you've both set the new record and then someone's had to lose. So it would be a real unprecedented run.
Yeah.
It's good the way it's panning out that although Parky's games will be out and it'll all be just the pressure cooker on Football Manager, we'll know exactly what's required. Yeah. People will be, for once, interested in what Football Manager scores. It'll be the talk of the town.
Yeah. No, it will. It's, I think it did look early doors like it was feet up, but I was always slightly concerned that once those games started coming out and things, it could change a bit, and that's how it's gone. So, yeah, I think it still does feel like something's got to go south for me, and Parky's games have all got to go north of expectations for anything to really happen.
Yeah.
But I've been burnt so many times in these competitions that I never say it's in the bag, right? Yeah. You just never know. So it's going to be closer than I thought it would be, I think, put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, at one point I thought Parky had just going to concede and not do any transfers because he was just completely quiet, and I think Hall basically galvanised the team, was like, look, there's a chance here. This is the only chance we've got. Chuck 2 Nintendo games at it and who knows what might happen. And so they've done that. But we've seen stranger things happen. It could be a delay on Football Manager.
Yeah.
Sega absolutely blow it and go, can't get that out, I'm afraid. Or no one reviews it. What if that happens? I mean, they always do, but... Yeah,
I mean, you'd expect it to still be there doing its thing, but you just never know. There's always room for the unexpected.
Absolutely. In terms of the Grand Prix, basically... Adkins, if he gets 10 games out, will win almost certainly.
Yeah.
It really is as simple as that. My forecast has him to score 848 points, which again will be a new record. That's with the day before scoring quite low on a 73. That's the only banana skin for him. He's got Spider-Man 2, The Lords of the Fallen, Like a Dragon, Gaiden, and then the day before. The day before is... I'm surprised he didn't just get rid of that and get a banker in, because of all the games, that's the one I would pinpoint as a problem child.
It's arrogance. That's all it boils down to. He's living on the high of this Baldur's Gate situation, and he's just sort of arrogantly just going, yeah, I can do no wrong. He's like a gambler on a high, just chucking it out, going, bring the money in. See what happens. You say all you had to do was just get something out that's definitely coming, and you've sealed the deal. So,
if for whatever reason, if the day before doesn't come out, because there was some murmurings that they hadn't trademarked the game title and there was a problem in getting that, which may cause a delay because you can't release if they got. Or they might have to come out with a new name. They've got to remarket.
Untitled game.
Well, they might say, look, it's called something else now, and we're going to give it another. We're going to launch it next year and like sort of rebuild the marketing just for a quarter or whatnot, because people might get confused. Or it could be they've resolved it and it'll be called the day before, but it was supposed to be out in March, and then a few weeks before they went, nope, sorry, that's not happening. And it's due in November, so not a lot of wiggle room if they do want to push it back even a couple of months. It's out in the bins for him. So that could cost him. Should that happen, Paper is forecast to pick up the title. So that's why he's chirping up, trying to make sure that all Adkins' picks are watertight. He's talking about the Lords of the Fallen not getting a new score and page. Like, he's getting desperate, but he's doing the right thing, to be honest, trying to make sure that he's in prime position. It's close between him and Adcock, though, believe it or not, and actually Salmon. Yeah, and Salmon. Those three are separated by like 6 points, so really any of those three could win it. Biff, I would say, almost out of the runnings. He's got the clubhouse lead, 781, but not setting the world on fire with an average of 79. Hall will finish last, most likely, 750. I mean, one of the all-time worst displays from him. And he's made 35 points worth of transfers, so that has not helped his cause at all. But if the day before comes out and all the other games come out, which I've checked, they all have release dates and haven't had any delays just yet. This will be the first time, I think, ever that every single team's got 10 games, including the championship game. So there will be a tip of the cap there that there's been a full roster from everyone who's partaken, because usually people run out of steam.
Query that.
Well,
yeah, you got to. I mean, that's unbelievable when you go after all these years that we've been doing it, and this, and you go, we've got to tip a hat for everyone getting 10 games out, and you go, well, that should really be the basic.
Yeah. Well,
I've been guilty of it in the past.
We'll get some more concrete data, I guess, in about 10 days when those two Speddings and Super Mario come out. That'll be two big ones in the way that people can save, and it could already be over by then. You never know, because if Spider-Man and Super Mario Wonder leave Parky more than 100 points off the pace, then RPG can't pull it out of its arse. It's done. Of course, if that's the Football Manager, definitely comes out. Oh no, it wouldn't matter, would it? It wouldn't matter, because you'd win because you have a 100-point advantage. But I don't think that's possible, really, based on the numbers.
Well, they'd have to really tank for me to,
We'll see. I've seen it happen. Anyway, according to the ERA, which is the UK trade body representing digital services and retail offering music, videos and video games, in its first week, EA Sports FC 24 sold over 150k physical discs worth over 9 million UK pounds. In addition, it sold over 924 digital units, 924k, I mean, that's an insane split, isn't it? Nearly 1 million digital and 150k odd of physical.
People are always just going to go for that digital now. Yeah. Like, the market has swung so heavily.
No more queuing up outside Asda at midnight to get that. Not required.
I can't believe they did that. Looking back on it, that's insane. But I mean, look, I do have a bit of nostalgia for physical, but I think in the day and age that we live in, and everyone's just worrying about consumption and recycling and all that kind of stuff, plastic use, you name it. I think, they don't need to release discs like this anymore in those big old things and those plastic. Like, it's just ticking a box for people.
Yeah.
I always think, like, why don't we release those in like cardboard or like some sort, like, like a book made out of card, but like that doesn't disintegrate. Like, I don't know. I just think surely there's a better way of doing this now.
Well, there used to be, like, the old PC games used to come in those big cardboard boxes.
Yeah.
I think Nintendo had cardboard boxes as well, like for the NES and maybe the SNES.
They did, yeah, because they folded, didn't they?
Folded up, yeah.
Yeah.
But then we got to like the PlayStation era and we had the CD case, the plastic CD dual case that you tread on and cracked inevitably within 4 minutes of getting the game, which was always an irritation. And that was it. It never went back to it. But there's definitely ways they could be fixing that. But it won't fix the convenience, because just downloading the game a day before and playing it dead on midnight is too much for people to resist. The total physical and digital unit sales hit about 1.075 million. And the reason why that's important is because according to this data, according to the ERA, that is 5% down compared to FIFA 23's week 1 volumes last year. Now, this is the UK only, which is a subsection of the market, but I would say probably one of the more popular markets for FIFA and for now EA Sports FC. 5% downturn, that feels like not too significant. I mean, it's a lot of units when you cater out for the millions that they will go on to sell, but I don't think that's an indication that people can't find it. It's probably just, I think you get that swing up and down year on year depending on the football landscape. I don't know if you agree with that, or whether you think that actually there's something there about the branding that may have caused that. I mean, hopefully we'll get some full European data in a few weeks from Chrissy Dring, which will have these comparisons. That's what I'm really interested in.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously not a large amount of United fans buying it at the minute. Liverpool fans are on a bit of a downer, but those Toon fans are on the way up. So,
well, they just thumped PSG.
Yeah. So no, I think you're probably right.
Replay it. What?
You'd probably argue that 5% is within an acceptable.
If they replayed that match, just to go on from this, if they replayed that match, who do you think the first person to complain about fixture congestion would be?
Really good point.
It'd be that Klopp, anyway.
Yeah, Selim will do it on a bloody Friday morning or something after his first escapades. Yeah. If you want to replay it, we'll do it then.
That's the only time we've got.
But I think it's fine. I mean, look, I think we said there might be a small drop, but it's probably not going to be noticeable. I expect there's a few people within that 5% that ain't realised and still going, "Where's my FIFA? I don't want this EA Sports shit." I'd expect there are some people doing that, but it might just be a sign of the times, right? In terms of people's income being squeezed so heavily at the minute that there's 5%, 10% more that can't afford it this year, which is not unreasonable to think either.
No. Yeah, I mean, it's not a huge... I mean, 5% is a lot of units, but I wouldn't be... This is one market, this is 1 week. Let's see in a monthly view with Europe and whatnot, take a more holistic view. But I thought it was interesting just to check in on that because we'd spoken about it a couple of weeks back. Last bit, and then we'll get out of this tutor and pass over. The number of concurrent players on Redfall on Steam, has dropped so low that it now reaches single figures every day. When the game launched 5 months ago, it was played concurrently by thousands of players, hitting a peak of around 6,100. However, as noted by PC Games N, the game's concurrent player now dips so low, there are certain times of the day where it's not possible to fill a 4-player co-op lobby because there are fewer players than 4 playing the game. Further research by VGC via SteamDB. It's not really research, it's just I love the way
someone's tried to join a game and I can't get in.
Shows that the game has in fact hit single player count at some point every single day since September 22nd, a full 2 weeks. So if ever there was an indication this was dead, then that's part of it. They keep saying it'll be a great game to play in 5 years, and I'm like, you might as well just cut this and kill it off. I did want to say this though, because some people are like, well, most people will be playing it on Game Pass, which is true. I would expect there to be a bigger audience on there. But I then checked and thought, well, let's see about other games. We've got Sea of Thieves, okay? It's an older game, Xbox game.
Yeah.
It's on Game Pass, so you can play it there. The lowest concurrent player that's hit in the last week and the last month is 7K. So even Game Pass isn't the big enough behemoth to stop people playing it to the fact where there's only less than 4 people sometimes on the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious that it's just not... People just don't want to play it.
No, don't blame them either.
Yeah. I'm torn between this one because I think people like me and you, if there was something there that was worth playing, we would play it.
Yeah.
And we would happily go back to it. But I think we're in the minority and they're just going to continue flogging a dead horse, I think, if they continue to try and make it somewhere near what they were trying to show it as. It's such a shame. I'm really disappointed by this one. It really does... I want them to do a Cyberpunk to it, but I just think they're not going to do that, and it ain't worth it. It's kind of like it's flopped, and anything you do now, any time and resource you put into it, is dead, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the Cyberpunk, there was an interest in the game at a base level. It was just a technical shit show. I think part of this is that it's not a very interesting concept to people. So even if you did fix it up, it's still like, well, I ain't going to play it still because it seems just a bit dull. So, yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to see whether they do continue to support it or someone just goes, look, pull the plug on that and work on something else. I ain't got time to keep dilly-dallying around with this. There's fucking 8 people playing it on Steam. It's on Game Pass. Leave it as it is. We'll try and get this 60 FPS mode out at some point, then walk away from it. But, yeah, not good for Redfall. Cyberpunk, on the other hand, sold 25 million copies now. 3 million for the Phantom Liberty, tracking at a higher rate than The Witcher 3.
The ultimate comeback.
So, and I'll be on that Phantom Liberty train at some point, hopefully after Spider-Man. That's the aim.
Yeah.
Definitely looking forward to going into that game now. It's all fixed up at 2.0. Laughing.
I must admit, I watched some of the streams of it. Not sure it's a Logan game, but I do like it. I think it looks good. So it's always good to see redemption and people giving things a second and third chance, because I think sometimes they deserve it, and this is one of those cases.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, close down this part of the podcast and move into some game impressions. It will be Dead Space, the remake. Adcock makes his long-awaited return to talk about a game that sits in one of his favourite genres over the year. Dead Space, the 2023 remake. I've played it as well, so I'll chuck my opinion in there as well. We introduced the option at this stage for the botchling bin, which will be explained perhaps at a later date once all the toot has been filtered through. But the botchling bin is now an option for people rather than just not put in the gallery. But the platinum, gold, silver, bronze still remains. Anyway, you get about 50 minutes of Dead Space 2023. Nothing more for us to say here other than we'll see you on the other side.
Welcome to the Dimp digital voicemail service. Please leave a message after the tone.
Alright, Biff here. Just played Dead Space. Pretty decent. Quite impressed with it. Still stands the test of time after all this time. Bit clunky in places, combat-wise, but I feel like it's meant to do that because it makes you want to feel vulnerable and clunky, but I sort of enjoy that side of it. You don't just walk into a room and beat the shit out of everything. If you're not careful, you will get the shit kicked out of you. But I feel the combat still stands up. Graphically pretty decent. Not the best thing I've seen on PS5, but they've done a good job of buffing it up. Played a little bit of the Game Plus mode as well. Got a new suit. It's worth sort of playing through it, I suppose, if you're really, really into it, just to unlock all the weapons and get everything upgraded. But yeah, overall pretty decent. Give it a gold. Very impressed by it, to be honest. Brought back a lot of memories, and I'm glad I bought it. But don't know if it would be worth the full whack when it come out. I suppose that's a different conversation. But yeah, overall, gold, really decent.
Here we are then, back with some game impressions to close out this edition of Idle Game Chat. Got myself apps here, joined by Pac-Man himself, Adcock. How's it going?
Hello, mate. Sorry, I just squeezed in the last bite of a kind of protein bar.
Is it nice? Because they can be a bit chalky, can't they?
No, it's recommended. Not
well,
an ad,
hang on. Are we getting paid for this? Because
no.
Oh, for goodness sake! Another opportunity
just
gone.
recommending it if it's there. Amazon fulfill.
Amazon.
Salted, yeah, well, not Amazon branded, but from Amazon. Salted caramel and chocolate. It's very, very good. Expensive though. At £24 for a box of 18. So you do the math.
Yes, but they're not cheap. Those protein bars. I mean, not that chocolate's cheap anyway. Like the Yorkie sets you off £1 at least, and then you think, should I get the duo for £1.50? And absolutely yes. And as you know, my technique, if you're stuck between which chocolate bar to get, you just pick them up and go by the weight.
Pound per weight ratio. That's the worst way to enjoy a snack.
Cannot lose.
Yeah.
But there we go. We're here to talk about Dead Space. This is the 2023 remake of the 2008 game. So we're talking a good 15 years have passed, which seems ample time to do a remake. I mean, it comes into that era of like the 360 PS3 where games started to sort of look good and look good in perpetuity almost. But this looked nice anyway. I'm sure we'll all get into it. I'm going to start us off by just reading out the little description on the PlayStation Store. We both played it on the PlayStation 5. I actually borrowed your physical edition to play this, which wasn't traded immediately, which I was grateful for. So no monetary outlay for me. We'll get into what you spent a bit later on. One critique I do have of that, just hearing that fucking disk drive whiz up every time I turn the PlayStation on, it does my head in. I've gone like years, which are all digital, and like I'll just be playing like another game, and it'll suddenly go. I'm not even using the disc. Don't know how you lot put up with it. Unbelievable.
Go on, give me this read out.
Isaac Clarke, so there's his name. I know you'd forgotten his name immediately. So it's Isaac, who we were playing as for 10 to 15 hours, depending on how long you took, is an everyman engineer on a mission to repair a vast mining ship, the USG Ishimura, only to discover something has gone horribly wrong. The ship's crew has been slaughtered, and Isaac's beloved partner Nicole is lost somewhere on board. Now, alone, and armed only with his engineering tools. That's not strictly true, because you do get a pulse gun. That is not an engineering... That's not standard issue for engineers, is it? They have a pulse gun. A pulse rifle, sorry. Armed only with his engineering tools and skills, Isaac races to find Nicole as the nightmarish mystery of what happened aboard the Ishimura unravels around him. Trapped with hostile creatures called necromorphs, Isaac faces a battle for survival, not only against the escalating terrors of the ship, but his own crumbling sanity, alluding to certain things there. So that's the description of Dead Space 2023, published by EA, developed by Motive. Let's start with our usual, sort of a bit of a cards on the table, because this is a remake, gives us a good place to start, because there are many ways in which we can take this. First of all, we both played on the PS5, which is one of the versions you can play. It's on Xbox Series consoles as well, and on PC. No last gen port, so this is a current gen game only. My first question is, did you play the original?
Yes and no.
Ooh.
I played it, but didn't play through it. I can't remember where I finished up with it. Maybe, I want to say just before halfway, maybe mission, I won't say actually. But yeah, probably just around the halfway point just before I dropped off.
That's interesting, considering I know some of your struggles throughout this. What was the reason for that? Was it just a different time where games weren't always... I mean, the priority at one point, I don't know about you, but I was never that interested in finishing games for a little while. It was just sort of play, and if you get bored, you walk away from it. Whereas now, much different. It's like, this has to get done before moving on. I want that completion. I want to tick it off. I want to beat the game almost. But back then, there may have been several things that I started back in that period. I remember Dishonored, or the 360 I did that with. But what's going on there? Any reason for that? 'Cause you were travelling around and flying around all over the place as well. Did that get in the way?
No.
Tom
I was
Travels
definitely-
Instagram. Hello?
I was homeward bound at that point, or actually very stationary. I don't know, if I'm honest. I can't remember that far back. It's a weird one, though, which is kind of why I revisited the game, because it ticks every box for me. It should be a game I absolutely love. And I couldn't remember why I dropped off it. You know, you just have that like vague memory of it. You kind of played it and just thought, oh, that's not for me. And just...
But it is for you.
Well, exactly. It couldn't be any more for me. Third-person survival horror. Stick it in space. Yes, please. So, yeah, a bit weird one, that first playthrough. And then I did play... I don't think I played the second one at all, which I think is meant to be pretty good. But I ended up playing the third one, and that was...
wow.
You know, when... it might have been Love Film. Got it on one of those like orders back when you could do that. Yeah, and I played through that one to completion. So that is my history with this series.
Love Film, the very first Game Pass sort of subscription, all you can eat, rent what you want, send it back. That's what it was back in the day. I used to bloody love that. And Dead Space 3, widely seen as the worst one. In fact, widely seen as quite a bad game. I don't remember it being that terrible, if I'm honest. I played it co-op with Biff, though. So at that point, all the survival horror elements are gone because you've got him waffling in ears with bantering, sort of... It's not the same, is it, when you've got someone bumping around in front of you? I mean, it gets quite funny, and it diffuses any sort of tension that's there. I think with Dead Space 2, at least my memory of it was that it went a bit more of the action route. So perhaps you go from Resident Evil 2 to Resident Evil 4, that type of vibe in terms of an uptick. But that's interesting that you didn't finish it. We should say that actually back then, in that period... you were falling asleep whilst playing games, like Gears 3, I remember. And that was with other people, so who knows what else was being... Yes, Ivor, he's made it on. His first ever appeal. Chester normally... That's Adcock's cat for the audio listeners, but Chester's normally dominating the visual viewers, but Ivor wants in. Just had his dinner, so he's a happy kitten. So I'm surprised to hear that, because I thought you had finished it for some reason, but... no, dropped it like a bad habit, and that was that. Yeah. And like I said, really, I wish I kind of did remember, but I couldn't remember exactly what didn't click about it for me. But that is a memory I had of it, was that something about this game, despite all signs pointing to you'll love it, I just didn't. So I went in. I was happy when this game got the remake, because I was like, right, gives me a chance to kind of right a wrong there. Yeah, so it's good when that happens, isn't it? When like is a remaster or something's brought back, and you're like for me, it was Resident Evil 4. Yeah, I was like perfect. Completely like ditched that after 6 hours, and I was like, that's always just a massive blemish. And now, arguably, the definitive versions there with the PS5 and PS4 remake of 2023, and I got to right that wrong. I did play through the original and played through 2 and 3, so I played the original trilogy. I remember liking it for sure, and it was one of those games that I didn't get initially when it came out, because it was a new franchise. Sort of didn't really know what Visceral, who were the guys that developed it back then, were doing, and I was kind of like waited. It was a good couple of years after it had come out. In fact, I think the third one was due to come out, and I was like, right, I want to go back and play the first 2. Did the Love Film thing, got both of those on the Love Film thing, played through them both, and was like, right, now I'm ready for 3 to close out this trilogy. And that's what it was. But we should say that we're both, well, I think we are both fans of survival horror in terms of a genre. Although we have, I remember speaking to you about Resident Evil 4, we were both taxed on that. It was draining experience to get through. And this arguably is much more intense. Much more draining. I don't know if it's more difficult necessarily, although, there's certainly tricky bits in this. But just that constant on-edge tension does eventually wear you down. And I think these are split up into nice little manageable chapters, sort of hour-ish, 45 minutes to an hour and a half time, and depending on how much you explore and whatnot. And that's a nice sort of get-out clause. You're like, right, chapter done. Although I was annoyed that sometimes it didn't sort of close a chapter as you were moving to a new area. It sort of sometimes was like you sort of just killed something and they'd be like, right, chapter 6, and I'm like, what? Hang on. That's
often I didn't know I'd even done it until I checkpointed, and I was like, oh, it's switched over now.
Yeah, and I was never sure whether I checkpointed or if I had to manually save, so I'd like try and get to the, and then I'd get attacked by something. I was like, oh, I've lost health. This is a disaster way to go out. But yeah, we're both fans of the genre, I guess, and I've got experience with the original. You've got some experience, but also with the third one itself. Anything else to declare, I guess, at this stage, in terms of background or context for audience members?
I guess my only bit of context, because I might come across a little bit negative on this game, and I think a big part of that is because I can't remember the exact run, but very recently I have played Resi 4, Survival Horror, and also, I forget the name of it, the game... help me out here.
Callisto.
By the Callisto Protocol.
Yeah.
By the maker of Dead Space, the original.
Big Glenn Schofield left Crofton Games now, so he's gone. Striking Distance, gone. So
and it was very much like a spiritual successor. So yeah, I've played a lot of survival horror recently. So I just want to caveat that. Knowing,
it's a good point actually, because I've done exactly the same thing. And knowing what I know, having played them all, I do think that's the right order. Just in terms of, you've got Callisto Protocol, which is a sci-fi survival horror, so very similar just in terms of themes of Dead Space. You don't want to be playing those back to back, and they actually released about 45 days apart, so there was a chance for that to happen. But just slotting in Resident Evil 4 in between that was a nice little breaker. And it's a different type of game. It's a little bit more... It's not as dreary, is it, Resident Evil 4? It's got some charm to it. Like, it's trying to kind of offer that sort of B-movie quality as well. Whereas Callisto and Dead Space are just so deadly serious. There's
the environments are literally rotting away around you. It's really depressing sort of place to spend your time, that ship.
Yeah, it's an absolute shithole, that Ishimura. I think it's a shithole before the Necromorphs got on, if I'm honest. I don't think they've kept that ship going very well, if I'm honest. Let's talk a little bit about... to be honest, the store page set up the narrative quite nicely. I don't think we need to delve any more into it than that. That is a nice setup, which is why I'm trying to get in the habit of doing that, because they tend to set the scene. But I guess one question to ask is... I don't know if you remember this, but in the original, Isaac couldn't speak. He was a silent protagonist. In this, he can... Now, I'm not going to sit here and say, I remember, oh, yeah, that's made a huge difference, because I can't actually remember much of the original at all. In fact, when I played this, I was like, I don't remember hardly any of this. And it's pretty one for one with the story and the chapters and whatnot. And, it's been technically remade, and they have made a lot of changes as well. But I couldn't sit there and tell you and list off the laundry list of changes. So even hearing like Isaac talk, I was like, this is just felt natural to me. I don't know if you got the same. It didn't feel shoehorned in. It actually felt like I'm sure this was there all along, but it absolutely wasn't. To
be honest, I wouldn't have even known. As I say, my memory's hazy, so I didn't even know that had been something added in. Yeah, I actually thought this was just literally a graphical upgrade, and I know. The only thing I knew is they've done something with like I think it was all closed off before, as in, whereas now as you go back, it's not just a hub world, and as a level closes, another one opens. It's more that you can backtrack if you wish,
and you have to, don't you? If there's certain elements where you do go back and forth, they've introduced sort of side quests to encourage you to explore a bit more, I guess. But yeah, in terms of the narrative, I will say that I don't know what I was expecting, but it didn't really blow me away. It was pretty standard sort of survival horror sci-fi caper. And I don't know if that was necessarily something that people were writing home about back in 2008, but I was like, it's serviceable, but certainly not kind of like blew me away with any sort of amazing revelations or any twists that do happen didn't really make me go, wow. It was just kind of like, okay, this is just standard affair. I don't know how you felt about the overall story.
Yeah, I feel like the thing is, I can't help but compare it to the other two games I played. And I feel like not that Resident Evil is telling anything particularly compelling, but it just exists in its own weird, you know, like it's Japanese and it's all a bit bizarre. Yeah, Dead Space, as you say, feels very much like a horror game from the era it was made in, like sort of early to mid 2000s. So yeah, it was fine, absolutely serviceable. Yeah, not really a great deal more to say without you going into spoilers and whatnot about what actually is going on that ship.
Yeah. I think most people will guess what's occurring once they get a few hours in. But you know, there's logs, they fill in the gaps. There's the fact that Isaac can talk back does mean those little video calls have some sort of back and forth. Whereas before, you'd literally just be spoken at, and then he'd just stand there, and you're like, well. Is this guy even alive? Like, is he just some husk? Is he a necromorph underneath it? And spoiler alert, he's not a necromorph. In fact, you see him with his helmet off at the very beginning.
You do, yeah, a couple of times.
I think, if I remember correctly, the original, I'm not sure you see his face, and if you do, it might be like right towards the back end. Right. It's sort of like a reveal. Whereas this one, he's got it off and he's chatting with his mates who are on board. But yeah, it is standard sort of affair. You go on there and the ship's a shithole. It's overrun with these necromorphs, and it's like, right, let's get off here. And for not for some bizarre reason, it's a video game. They need you to play it, but everything that could go wrong technically to get off does go wrong. You know, an hour and a half in, you're like, oh, we're going to wrap this up and be off this ship in a minute. And of course, no, that can't happen. I don't know why. I was sitting there thinking, oh, this might end now. Like, I was sort of hoping that there was a way for me to get off after like an hour of being on there. And it never happens. What did you think of the game's visuals? Because I thought they were okay, but for like a remake of an older game, again, wasn't like blown away by it. I was like, this is fine, runs fine. Did have one little technical error where it kind of got stuck when I went up. So I don't usually do this because I think it fucks with the games. I'm not going to blame the game for this. But I went to the PlayStation Home, like just pressed that middle button and went in there for some reason, fiddled around to do something, then came back, and then I went back into the game and it was jammed, and I was like, it clearly didn't. And there's Chester making the appearance, so he couldn't just let Ivor have the spotlight. Again, audio listeners missing out. YouTube.com/Dimp Digital, and you'll find the Idle Game Chat podcast in its own fucking playlist. But yeah, I'll say the graphics on it I thought were just sort of okay again. Agree?
Yeah,
Am I being too harsh? I don't know what I'm expecting though.
I thought like it was, the visuals are nice. Again, yeah, I think the problem with it is the environment. Like, I just think because obviously that ship is what it is, you know, there are, you know, you go through all the things you would do normally, mechanical and medical and all those different kind of environments. But the palette's the same. The environments are very similar. And even like the enemies types are quite similar. So I wouldn't say it was particular. I didn't think it wasn't nice. I mean, I agree with you. It didn't blow me away for a PS5 only remake, but to me, it was just the familiarity and the lack of kind of environmental changes. That's what I kind of took away from it. I was just like, oh, I just want to see another area. I just don't want to be, you know, constantly enclosed in these hallways. But I mean, I guess that is the entire game.
Yeah, I will say the lighting was really nice. Like, if you played it in a dark room and like had those headphones on, like the sound as well. My God, like they've done a great job there. You hear him scrabbling around in the vents, and you're like, right, is that going to pop out? And I was reading they've got some like AI or algorithm that if you played it again, you wouldn't get the same sort of enemy placements or number of enemies. Like, it would adjust it based on your performance, like tweak it. Because sometimes I'd walk by. I'd die basically and go back and do the same thing again, and I wouldn't get jumped by the necromorph like I did the first time. Yeah, and it was clearly adjusting. I think that was a nice little under the hood sort of detail there. It could be bollocks though. You don't really know. They might have just made that up and just had free instances of certain bits and pieces. But yeah, I think it's okay. And the lighting was good, and like I said, the sound was very good. And I had that one little problem when I mentioned about having a little technical issue. You sort of perked up there, so I'm wondering whether you had an example of actually where something did go wrong.
Yeah, I just got an environment, like I was completely hard stuck in an environment. I kind of went off. Yeah, I went off piece towards the end of the game. I kind of just, you know, when there's this very dark bits, and I thought the stairs were kind of bending one way, and I ended up walking into like the background, and Isaac just kind of glitched, and I just couldn't get him out of it no matter what I did. So I had to just reset my last save. It's a bit annoying, really, because it was actually I can't remember. It annoyed me at the time anyway.
Did you lose much progress? Like, did you have to go back?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Maybe,
yeah.
But I just remember it being enough to irritate me. I think I just cleared out that room and then had to clear the room again. I was like, well, that's annoying.
Yeah,
but that was it.
I do remember seeing also some like popping of certain objects, which I was kind of like. I mean, it's a very linear game. It has little branching bits, but it's not a big open world. And I was a bit like taken aback by that.
Yeah,
you clearly pack it in some bits and pieces, but I won't dwell too much on the visuals. They do the job, and I think they get the atmosphere right at least. And it sets the tone. So, regardless of whether Isaac's face does look a little bit weird or whether all the other faces look a bit weird, then the actual necromorphs look fucking hideous. So that's the main sort of. They are the stars of the show. So maybe that's where all the like when you peel them off with those weapons, like when you start to really dismember them, they get in a right old state. And then just to cap it off, that stomp really does.
Oh yeah,
really does feel good. Which Callisto Protocol just shamelessly stole and put into there, but you got to have it. So at the game itself, this is the nuts and bolts of it. Survival horror tend to come with a bit of a caveat these days, or not these days, but in general, like there will be some clunkiness there. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that since you've played The Last of Us Part 2 recently, and that's not a survival horror game per se, but it kind of is in some aspects. There's definitely moments of that where you feel the same. It puts that same sort of out. And in fact, in Last of Us Part 2, there's almost like a whole Resident Evil section in that game. And that game feels smooth as butter. Like the way which Ellie and Joel kind of move around and you can go prone and crouch and mantle over things. Dead Space doesn't have any of that. Like it's very much like, I mean, we slagged Leon off, didn't they, for having rocks in his boots. And it's the same here. It's kind of like that older school mentality. But in 2023, how did you kind of get on with playing the game? Because this is where things can unravel quickly for people, especially when you're under pressure.
Yeah, I mean, I found it easier because there weren't the sort of big environments. There was none of that kind of, running, like you weren't scrabbling around so much as in Resi. But so I didn't find that a problem. What I really found a problem with the controls was, it was funny. The first time I went to what I'm going to talk about, I was like, this is amazing. I remember this from the first game. I love it. And it's the 0G bits, I just thought, love this. Like when the sound cuts and you've just got the silence of space and just the jets. And I was like, and then the necromorphs start kicking in like after the first few bits. You're like, this is so good. By the end of that, I was just like, I was dreading them because I was like, there's a bit where you have to kind of go through all the fans, and then there's a bit later on with all the kind of tentacles, and you've got to navigate your way through and keep going up. I just found that so clunky and so like unresponsive, and struggled to like find out where I was being hit from. It was really, I hated those areas by the end of this game. So yeah, I wouldn't say so much like on boots on ground. I found it okay. Although, yeah, absolutely, he is a rocks in boots fella again. But I feel like where he's doing business, it's not as noticeable because they are mainly, even if you're in a bigger area, it's generally sort of like gangways and stuff. It's not, there are a couple of bigger open areas, but you tend to kind of have like one sort of hulking fucking thing to deal with then rather than a lot. So I just think it's a little bit different. You can kind of mind yourself a little bit better than you can. Also, you've just got to watch out. Like if they put something in front of you, something's sneaking up behind you as well in that game.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's the 0G parts I found as frustrating as well. Like, and there's a couple of like instances where there's puzzles and whatnot, and for the life of me, I don't know what it was about this game, but the puzzles I really just got stumped several times. I got through them, but at some point I was like, fucking. And I know it's very individual puzzles. Like I've done stuff, and then like someone else has got completely stuck, and you think they must be stupid. But the same happens to me, where you, for some reason your brain very quickly decides what the parameters are, and if you're off on those parameters by an inch, you will never solve the puzzle. So you have to kind of unwire your brain and start all over again. But the 0G, especially when they throw in combat as well, and those things jumping at you, spitting shit at you, highly irritating towards the back end as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I felt like there was more moments of that than the original, and I could be wrong there, but that I didn't like that at all. I think generally, like when you're on the boots on the ground, that stuff's kind of fine. Like I don't run around in these games anyway. I sort of walk because the amount of times you get. I always think in my head, am I attracting more attention by running? And I'm not convinced you don't. I actually think some games do punish you for sprinting round, but I generally take the safe and slow approach. What I did get frustrated with in terms of what I'd call clunkiness is just what would have been seen back in the day is complete innovation, like having the map and your items all come up on this like mixed virtual reality sort of screen in context of the game. Just felt so clunky to get in and out of, and there's a couple of times when I was like using medipacks by accident because the game thought I wasn't in the menus and I was, and checking that little waypoint as well. Like, clicking that by accident when you're trying to run away is the worst, because he stops, he puts his fucking arm down, looks at it, and you're like, no, there's a necromorph up my arse, I need to get moving. And I did just get tired towards the back end of just how clunky that all felt.
Yeah, I hate it all. I didn't hate it because I used it so much, the little waypoint finder, but I just feel like, again, comparing it to a Resi where you kind of learn the layout of, especially like in the early games, Baker House, the mansion, the police station, you end up knowing if they're sending you to the West Wing, you're like, oh, Jesus, that's where those fucking hunters are. And, you know it intimately, like after a while. This, I just found that because I was just following that waypoint a lot, I was just kind of stomping through environments, not really learning things as I'd like to in these sort of games. There's a great atmosphere in it, but I almost feel like that kind of done it a disservice by, just being able to almost, follow that line on the floor and not really worry about where you're going too much. And it's also that kind of, it is old school in that, like one door, you'll follow the waypoint. There'll be two other doors where there'll be like gear and loot, and then you do you know what I mean? It's just like, all right, go through door A and B, and then when you're done with that, carry on the main path to C, and you're like, well, just it feels very just video gamey, which is, again, I mean, it is a video game, so what kind of criticism's that? But I know what I mean. I feel like it is. I don't know how much they've changed here. I don't think it's on the same levels of like a Resi uplift where you kind of, I don't know this game anywhere well. I clearly don't know it well enough because I never finished it, but I feel like most of it is, like you said, almost one for one. I mean, clearly there are changes, but I just feel like it's not being changed in any sort of significant way perhaps, and it does feel like an older game because of that.
Yeah, I think they were, to be honest, I think they were fearful of changing too much, because you would have had people going, oh, it's not Dead Space if you take away the marker, if you take away the... Because you can pause the game, but all you can do is change like graphic settings and sound. But when you're in game, if you need to refer to the map, the game continues, which is very like Dark Souls-y esque, but it's... I'm one of those people that check the map constantly because I want to just make sure of, if I can go in a room, I'll go in there to have a little look. Side quests might pop up, or there might be some resources that I need. So I was forever having to go in that menu, check where I am every 10 meters. Right, I could never get my bearings, and maybe it's designed to put you in that situation, because it was overwhelming at times when the pressure was on. I was like, I can't afford to look at the map here. I'm going to have to go with my gut, which I guess is kind of good. But for general exploration, as someone who likes to kind of fully explore most of the areas, I was really struggling at times just fighting against the game and my will to sort of look where I wanted to go.
I'm glad you said that, because I was exactly the same. Like that feeling of just kind of being overwhelmed and not knowing. Yeah, like not having that time sometimes to just take a breath is... Yeah, it's tough.
Well, one thing that you'd mentioned to me before I started playing it was that there were a couple of instances where the difficulty had to go down. So we started it... I don't think you wanted that revealed, potentially, but I think this is an important part of the conversation. I put it on normal and left it on there, and there was definitely a few moments where I was almost pulling my hair out, but, like most times, you can get through it. But this seems unusual for you. The man that's completed Bloodborne, Dark Souls, didn't bother with Sekiro, Elden Ring, all these hard as nails, generally considered some of the tougher games, old school 2D fucking games that are probably harder than all of them put together because you don't have any checkpoints. And yet Dead Space in 2023, the remake, has undone him and got him
on normal.
on normal.
Yeah.
What's happened here?
I was just struggling with it, mate. As in, like, I was struggling with the diff. It was. Do you know what? It was that zero. I think we spoke about it just as you got it. It was that 0G boss you fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is where I think I first done it, and I used that to get past it. And I was like, right. Then I whacked it back up to normal for probably maybe the next 2 or 3 missions, and I got stuck somewhere. And I was like, do you know what? I'm just gonna pop it down, and then it never went back up again. I was just like, I shouldn't have done it in a way, but I just didn't. You know, when you get I didn't want to turn the game on, but also, like you, I kind of do like to get through things for the most part. So I was like, right, what's going to get me back on this tonight? And I was like, do you know what? I'm just going to stick it back on easy. And to be honest, I would say I wouldn't recommend it, but it was still hard enough that, you know, you couldn't fuck around. But
just one shot and everything, were you?
No. It kind of, you still had to sort of, you know, it would still shit you up, but it did just take the sting off it. Like, you would definitely do more damage basically and take slightly less damage. So it was a big help. And I did then enjoy it more because I was kind of just, you know, I don't know, like I said, I don't know why. I just found this game, I did find it quite difficult, considering it is like my kind of just, you know, type of game that I would normally get on with quite well. And yeah, just like I said, I think because of what I played it with, it just really kind of soured my experience somewhat. And I just needed that extra sort of hand holding to kind of get me through those, especially the back end of the game.
Yeah. And that's interesting to hear. I mean, that is unusual for you, but it's something clearly awry here. So here's one thing I definitely think was slightly off. I didn't find the shooting very precise at all. Like, there was something around the aiming, and I don't think you have to be ultra precise, but there are certain instances where it would just, and look, this is on me. I could have gone in the settings and tuned it, but I refuse to do that because I don't want to waste time doing it, and I like to just play default settings, default difficulty. This is what they think works, and I'll be the judge of whether it works for me. But there were definitely moments where I'd like go to adjust slightly, and it would go too far. Mm-hmm. Like, and again, I think it comes into this sort of this clunkiness feel where it's not very fluid. Like, I almost wanted like gyro controls on Zelda, you know, where you can just sort of fine tune that arrow just to get, because you have to be quite accurate. The whole, one of the unique things about this is the enemies come steaming at you, and one of the best ways to get rid of them is to dismember them, legs and arms, cut them off, take the head off if you can. But that requires a level of finesse depending on the weapon that you've got and whatnot. Did you find that whole loop to be as satisfying as it's kind of advertised, or would you prefer just to be shooting sort of Plaga in the head and then stabbing them when they fall on the floor awkwardly?
I don't know, it is quite nice, isn't it? When you kind of use your stasis to freeze them, take their legs off and stomp the fuck out of them, and then maybe put one in their head at the end. It is a nice feeling. And some of the weapons, it is like, there's definitely like good things about this game. Like the arsenal is interesting because it is technically all from a sort of engineering standpoint, like the
pulse rifle, mate.
That is literally standard fare. But like the little disc saw thing, I love that. Just really getting up close to them and just shooting one off at the end. But it is pretty good, isn't it? It is fun, but also it kind of goes against everything you know of, like headshot. You know, you need to be slowing these down first, otherwise you will be in trouble.
Yeah, and they throw different types of enemies at you where you have to kind of adjust your aim and, you know, aim for different things and whatnot. So they keep you on your toes. And the arsenal you do procure over time is impressive and good fun. There's certainly some great weapons in there. What do you think of this, though? Because what I notice is every time you pick up a new weapon, you then inevitably, because the game's coded this way, start to get ammo for that weapon. Then you pick up another one, and then you get ammo for that. So every time you get an ammo drop, it's diluted between more and more weapons. And this is standard, this is standard design. It has been for many, many years. But for some reason, this game, it got on my goat a little bit. I don't know why that was, but I was getting more and more annoyed that I weren't getting the drops I wanted for the specific weapons I liked. But Is there any way to resolve that? I mean, what some people actually recommend, don't pick up any other weapons other than like they figure out which ones are the powerful ones. They say, okay, you only need these 3 weapons. Don't pick anything else up because then all your ammo will be for those 3 ones.
Yeah.
But obviously, if you're playing for it normally, you won't care to know that, and you'll end up getting ammo for stuff that A, you're not very good at, or B, isn't good for situation X or situation Y. But that's standard sort of affair, isn't it, in many games, not just survival horror, actually.
It is annoying because you end up then just, like I always think of Resi when you get the Magnum and you end up just saving it for a point like way too far because it's so rare, and so you end up with your best guns never getting used. You end up like something you haven't leveled up, just getting loads of ammo for that. It is really frustrating, and it's so nice. The other thing I thought about this game actually, it is very video gamey because so often you're going to get into an encounter, whether it's a boss or just a lockdown or
fucking quarantine lockdowns. Jesus, they've done my head in.
So annoying.
You're like, oh, for fuck's sake.
You'll walk into a room with about 30 fucking lockers in, loads of little floaty boxes. It's like it doesn't sell itself very. Something's coming up. And I know a lot of that happens, but you can be a bit more strategic with it. This is literally might as well have a big sign like "boss in the next room" sort of thing. It's a bit mad.
It's interesting. I do like the idea and the core combat of it, but I felt like it just didn't feel. I don't know. I was expecting more. I think in my head, I had built this up to be like the best survival horror game, and many people will say that. Mm-hmm. I thought this is going to be excellent, like a 2023 remake, ground up. It's going to look great. It's going to have quality of life improvements. I don't know what they were, but I'm not sure there was many of them, which is fine. It's a horror game, but when I got said and done with it, I was like, that felt just like it was okay. It was like good, enjoyable sort of romp, but didn't suggest to me like, where was I getting this opinion from that it was the best of all time? And I don't think this hasn't sort of solidified that. I was kind of like, it was decent. I'm glad I played it. I certainly would want to continue if they do another one, but generally there was just something sort of missing. I don't know what it was. I cannot put my finger on it. But
no,
it's a tricky one.
No, I think I agree. Like I said, I was pinning it on my sort of like lackluster experience more on what I'd done, like putting it on my own fault. But maybe some of it is, I don't know. Like I said, the bar's been set so high with those other remakes for me that I've played now. And like, obviously the Resi series has been doing this now. There's 3 of those games. And even like Callisto was just a nice surprise because that got absolutely ripped to shreds in the sort of mainstream reviews. I really wasn't expecting much there, and that was actually, I'm not saying it wasn't better than this. Like I can see that fundamentally, but
sort of muted
which
himself.
is kind of crazy. Sorry, I had a phone call coming through.
Yes, it's a tricky one. Any other comments about Dead Space that we perhaps haven't touched upon? I don't think I have anything else. Like, it feels like we've given it a bit of a kick in, but I spent 14 hours in it, which
was about the same.
Game clock. And I did all the side quests that I found. Sort of made a point to do all those. What did you make? I guess one question I had. What did you make? We sort of touched on this earlier. What did you make of the whole traversal and the ship itself being a bit of an onion, because you start to upgrade like your security levels, you can access rooms and go back. Did you partake in much of the optional stuff or explore, or was you kind of like, get me through and out of this as quickly as possible?
So early on, and then quickly just fell away with it. I wanted to play it properly because I missed out last time. I was like, I'm going to do this like in a really sort of like methodical, slow way and see everything. And then once I got past that halfway point, I was like, just get me off this fucking ship.
Yeah, there's certainly parts of it that aren't up to snuff and are somewhat annoying. I think I did a pretty thorough job of exploring. Like I said, I did most of the side quests, but I remember I activated one of them, and it was only because I went into a room to explore, and I was like, there's a good chance I've missed something, because earlier on in the game I hadn't clocked that the map tells you if you've been or haven't been in a room. It wasn't until a little bit later on I was like, I need to keep an eye on that because I want to kind of everything I can go in when I walk past it. I want to do, and I didn't make a point of going like all the way back to get in like a level 3 room that I had not gone in. I was like, I'm not going back there because I've heard things in the vents again. There's no need for me to be risking like my life for this sort of dross that they're going to wheel out. But I think we're about time to make the final verdict. Now, this is one of the first times we'll be introducing the botchling bin. So previously, we've got the gaming gallery. You'd either get a platinum, gold, silver, or bronze, and it would go up nicely in your personal exhibition, on the wall. Sort of nice plaque, depending on the award you gave it. But anything that didn't quite make the grade was just left outside. That was it. Just sort of, sorry, we're not even going to bother unlocking the doors. What I've done is I've hired a few bin men to go around and collect all those games, put them into the botchling bin. So everyone now has their own personal botchling bin, and this is where the stuff that doesn't make the cut goes. I'm not saying that Dead Space is going to go in the botchling bin for you. I'm just saying for the audience, whilst we bring this in, I'll be mentioning it a few times that should it not get the bronze level, it will go into an actual bin where when people are looking around, they can look up on the walls and say, oh, look at those great games. And they go, oh, what's in there? And there's all sorts of crap, ideally. And it might not be crap. It might be a 90 rated game like this sitting there. And people think, what's he done there? Playing it on bloody story mode. But final thoughts and then and then the final grading of Dead Space 2023, please.
Final thoughts are: do not play this game when you've played many other survival horrors back to back. Give yourself a fresh palette. Although you did the same, it doesn't sound like it.
What's
had the
fresh
same
palette?
sort of,
What, one a year? What are we saying?
Yeah, one a year. Play a nice Super Mario, then crack on with this, and you'll have a better time. That's what I say. Save this for proper like winter Halloween.
Yeah.
Only one of the year. You'll enjoy it more than I would. And in terms of rating, now, if I'm honest, the botchling bin is sniffable, but I feel like a madman doing that. I can't give a game that's so, widely acclaimed, stick it in the botchling bin.
Mate.
But so I feel a bit of a fraud because I didn't enjoy this playthrough really, but
chuck it in the bin. Be brave.
no, I can't. I'm not going to be brave. I'm going to be weak. I'm going to give it a bronze game. There were good bits. I did enjoy it. And I know fundamentally it's a good game. I'm not going to go back and play it again, but I feel like I should. I'd probably leave it a year or two and give it another caning, but it's not going to happen.
You'll get 3 hours into that and be like, no.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Do you know what? That's the other thing, isn't it? That 13 years ago I played this and essentially the same thing happened. I don't know why. It's weird. I guess just something about it just does not click for me. Can't put my finger on it, but I've dropped it once, I've story moded it once, and I didn't really enjoy either playthrough. No. How about you?
Well, so this is an absolute Ronnieism, as I'll call it, and Ronnie's the little brain that runs my head. He has these weird little prerequisites, rules and whatnot. Sort of charming, some people say. I'll say you try living with him. Difficult. So really, it's a silver rated game for me. I did enjoy it on the whole. However, what they've done is almost unforgivable, and this is a complete Ronnieism. There is an alternate ending to this game. People would have been aware of this if you kept any sort of news cycle up. The alternate ending, I've not seen it. I've not got to it. The reason I haven't seen it or got to it is because, one, I didn't look it up because I was so sour over this. I knew it going in. I knew this fully going in. So why it's bothering me this much, I don't know. But the only way to get that ending is to go and boot up New Game Plus mode and then collect all these collectibles, basically. Yeah. And then you get an alternate ending. Now, I don't know if this is actually going to... This may be rooted in complete bollocks because they may not decide to do this, but... Before I even played it, I saw a headline saying, "Oh, Dead Space's alternate ending may be setting up a new what do they call it? What's that bloody word? Continuity, much like Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3 remake. It's kind of going to do our own-ish sort of thing with this and change it." So if that really bothered me that you can only access it through New Game Plus, because if that does end up being sort of like quote unquote the canon route through for like Isaac's journey, then it's nonsensical, because why is he running around in New Game Plus with all these power upgrades, all these weapons that he hasn't got yet? Like, if that was the true canon run, he wouldn't have all the shit you get for New Game Plus. You wouldn't get all the nodes, all the upgrades, all this new suits. So based on that one detail, it goes to the bronze. And my advice to people, if they're going to try and do things like this, if you want to do an alternate ending, I'm fine with it. The more, as I get older, I get more and more annoyed with it, because you feel like you've missed something. But if you're going to do it and it's involving collectibles, just have the collectibles scattered throughout the game. Do you know what I mean? Don't make me replay the game again to unlock the collectibles that weren't there in the original run, and then suggest, this is all internet, suggest that that's going to be sort of the diving off point for a potential second game. Because it doesn't make any sense when you get it down to brass tacks. It annoyed me.
I love Ronnie's cost it a full point. I've been listening to a lot of the backdated podcasts, you and Logan, and Ronnie's causing all sorts of bother, really. So, well.
But that is annoying, though, isn't it? Because I bet you was like, I want to see the old now. I bet you just looked it up, of course. But
oh, no, I didn't even know it existed. I'll have a look. Like I said, I literally played this and then gave it to you and didn't really think anything more about it, it just shows you. Normally I would do that. First thing I'd do is like read about what I've just played and see what I've missed and stuff. I will look at it now, and then I'll get back to you about what I read. But no, I mean, they don't bother me. I haven't got that Ronnie brain, though. I would just, any alternate endings, I would just probably, look them up online and think nothing of it.
That's fine. Like I said, I'm fine with alternate endings. Just don't lock them away behind a non-canonical New Game Plus mode, which couldn't have possibly happened if you play the events as they were intended, and then say that's... And they've not said this, but the suggestion is that could be a route to go to the next one. So if that happens, I may be vindicated. You never know. In 2 years' time, 3 years' time, they might say, no, that's not part of like the canon universe. Doesn't matter. But these Ronnieisms will cost people. If they're going to start they're getting smart with it, aren't they? They're trying to be too cocky for their own good. There's no need to do something like that. What do you think of New Game Plus? Have you ever bothered?
No.
No.
The only I keep saying I'll go back to Elden Ring. It's one of the only games I've kept, and I'm all set for New Game Plus. But just never. Because I'm guessing the first time you do it, it's easier, right? Because you've got everything. I know maybe the level of the enemies get tougher, but generally you're going to be so overpowered by that point that.
Yeah, your knowledge as well and your skill would have been finally sort of crafted at that point. I think if you left it a year and went back, a real struggle. That might, just initially, but I just never bother with it. Especially with a game that's like, you could probably run through this in half the time we did. Like,
100%.
Point A to point B, but again, if you're running around in these games, like sprinting, I just think, what are you doing? Anyway, 2 bronzes for Dead Space 2023, the remake, highly rated, sort of 89 open critic score, not for Adcock and Apps, but that's what people pay the big bucks for, to hear that sort of dross come out. Anyway, we're going to close the podcast down for this week, but nothing more for us to say other than thanks for your time and ta-da.
This was a Dimp Digital production.